is different, that it can do no wrong, that it can serve as a model for the world, it can serve to police the world because it is a country of virtuous people and blah, 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 all this crap. But, I mean, it's a remarkable myth. It's extremely, deeply ingrained in American consciousness. The flip side of this is this notion of Babel, which is the opposite of America as a city and hill, is this idea of the specter of Babel, that because America is a land of immigrants, because it was founded on the violence of African slavery, on the theft of Indian land, and so forth, because there's this enduring pluralism, polylingualism in the United States, side by side with this image of America as a city on a hill, is this notion of America as a return to Babel, the specter of Babel coming. And it's a specific understanding of Babel. Leo was just mentioning to me that there are many different ways in which Babel is mentioned. The American interpretation of Babel is one of disunity, of chaos, of misunderstanding, right? And more important, Babel as the site where translation never stops. People are always constantly having to translate because people are constantly having to speak different languages, and so the task of translation is over. And therefore, Babel is that place where the transparency of meaning and the instrumentalization of language is impossible to arrive at. Language can never be instrumentalized, and translation can never end, meaning can never be transparent. One is always laboring to speak. Communication is always this all-consuming labor, right? And the idea of labor, of course, in biblical terms, if you think of America as a city on a hill and Babel as this place where labor continues, so Babel is a fallen space. Now, we know it's fallen because people have to work. Whereas America as a city on a hill, it's a city of perfect understanding, transparency, mutual understanding, would be a place where the labor of translation would end. So that would be somewhat paradisical, return to Eden, the Eden of meaning, which gets mystified as, oh, American plain speak. Right? The ideal American politician is the plain-spoken politician, one who doesn't indulge in theorizing, or one who doesn't indulge in fancy terminology, but who says what he means and means what he says. Not a bunch of people. Anyway, this is what Americans, for the most part, idealize, this plain-spoken sort of figure, right? And the ones that get in trouble are the ones precisely who seem to be capable of saying what they So these two opposites of city on a hill and Babel. And then from there I talk about how Iraq presents precisely the disruption of this neat dichotomy, because what you see in Iraq is precisely the return of Babel with a vengeance, and therefore the failure of the Americans to hang on to this notion of the city on a hill. And ironically, it has to take place in the place precisely where the historical Babel is located, right on the Euphrates River, which is where the original Babel is. And I talk about it in relation to American dependency on Iraqi translators, how that dependency can never be domesticated, how American dependency on Iraqi translators always end up subverting American imperial designs, precisely the design of Iraqi translators. Americans cannot trust Iraqi translators. At the same time that Iraqis themselves can't trust Iraqi translators. So Iraqi translators are completely literally Iraq in a hard place. Right? And how this shows eventually, and I go into details, I have to talk about this a little bit more later if you want, but I conclude by saying that what we see in the situation in Iraq exemplifies something about translation, number one, as against this notion of translation as merely an instrument for the conveyance of meaning. Meaning in turn simply as a transparent medium for the expression of will and so forth. Instead, what we see in Iraq, the situation in Iraq is a translation as something that is predicated on untranslated meaning, that translation conveys not just meaning, but the impossibility of meaning. Translation also conveys that which resists translation, which is to say, linguistic difference. The linguistic difference which can never be adequately accounted for, but persists nonetheless. And the reason why it's important to take a look at this is because untranslatability as a principle of resistance is the guarantee, the translation will always have to start again and again. So untranslatability guarantees that there will never be an end to translation, just as it assures us, if that is the right word, assurance, that translation will always have to start again, that therefore the process of communication, right, will always have to continue, that there will never have to be an end to communication. And so long as there is communication, right, there is the possibility not just of power emerging, but also of resistance to this power, right? That the possibility of communicating what at the same time remains uncommunicable is in fact the guarantee of holding the world. It will always be holding. Right? To the extent that there is difference, there will always be holding. That is to say, that there will always be something more, something that cannot be accounted for, something that is always yet to be thought, something that is always yet to arrive. So that's how I finish it. So,
so we're now open for comments, questions.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I missed the first part of your talk.
So there wasn't much to it.
Right. You know, I had the good fortune of spending a few weeks this year in Guangzhou, China, third largest city in China, and working at the university. And one of the things that really struck me about intellectual work going on there is, you know, many of the books that I thought I'd never heard of, or even authors that they were here, you know, learning about for the first time, like Foucault, Lyotard, or the Liberation Field, each of one offer. They have been available in translation. I've been in China for decades, for a long, long time. And so it makes me think that, you know, I mean, yes, you can have the work of translation, especially to a kind of a dominant language that is considered by community as, you know, unifying as maybe Mandarin Chinese would be for the Chinese themselves. But within the language itself, you know, what gets translated into those languages, or by means of those languages, those dominant languages, are a lot of transgressive texts from other communities, and as maybe the Chinese are just finding ways of expressing some of their own discontents and so forth and so on. And when you think of America, maybe next only to the American Constitution, the single most important text is really Alexis de Tocqueville's work on America, Democracy in America, which is translated from the French into. So what I'm saying is, so one can speak of, I guess the work of somehow voicing the idea that there is the power producing, a power inducing, and the kind of whole community sort of like supporting sort of like one dominant language. But into that language, all kinds of transgressive mechanisms could also be embedded.
I agree.